Hi, everyone. Wow, that was a really good lunch. All right, for this next segment, connecting the dots on the map, FCC data and mapping update, I'd like to invite the panelists up to the stage. Sayuri Rajapaksa, Acting Chief, Office of Native Affairs and Policy, the FCC. Kimia Nikesh, Assistant Counsel, Broadband Data Task Force, FCC. And our very own Natalie Runyon, Geospatial Information Officer, New Mexico Broadband and Information Technology and New Mexico Office of Broadband Access and Expansion. My apologies if I butchered some of the names. Okay, you're doing a presentation. Okay. We will be doing a presentation. My apologies. Thank you. Your first slides. The slides should be here. Yeah, so here we go.
So I click this?
Yes.
Please.
The green is the pointer. Oh, did it work?
No. Oh,
No, I think you do.
this one?
I don't know.
Oh,
So it's moving.
it's like, now how do I go back?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am.
By explaining these components.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Good to go?
You sit down or stand by?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Kimia Nixaresh. I am joined today by my colleague, Sayuri Rajapaksa, and we are here to give an overview and an update about the FCC's National Broadband Map. Okay. So just a bit of overview and context. Everybody in this room has already spoken about and understands well that access to internet is essential for participation in modern American life. And the first step to getting everybody connected is to know where broadband is and is not available across the United States and territories. The way the FCC historically collected this data through Form 477, we know overstated broadband availability, and especially so on tribal lands. The main reason for that is because that collection went down to the census block level. So if one house was served in a census block, the whole area would be marked as served. We knew we had to do better. Congress directed us to do better. So the Broadband Data Act was passed in 2020, and it directed the FCC to establish a new broadband data collection, which is far more granular. So now we are actually going location by location, literally structure by structure, and mapping availability that way. This new data collection is also subject to input from the public, state, local, tribal governments, all kinds of stakeholders who can validate and challenge or dispute the data on the map, which we think is a really amazing feature to help us refine the accuracy. The other way that this map is just designed is to be an iterative process where over time, with each data collection cycle, the data updates and changes to reflect actual changes on the ground, which is really important. So in November of 2022, we released the pre-production draft of the National Broadband Map. There's two sets of data which populate the map. First is the broadband serviceable location fabric, which is the actual locations which underlie the availability data. So if we were looking at this area, for example, the fabric would be like, oh, there's a building over here, there's a school over there, there's a row of houses, right? It's about identifying the actual locations which make up the map. The fabric is developed by CostQuest in consultation with the FCC and our rules. And the fabric is updated twice per year. That's because each version of the fabric is tied to an availability filing window, which happens every 6 months. As I'll go into more detail later, the locations on the fabric, as well as the availability data, are both subject to challenges. So once we have the actual locations set for a filing window, internet service providers will file their availability data on top of those locations. So that data is, where they make services available, what technologies, maximum advertised speeds, all kinds of details like that. That data also comes in a new vintage every 6 months, but that data is actually continually updated on the map. So every 2 weeks, the availability data is updated to reflect revisions to filings, resolve challenges, right? As the data changes, the map will reflect that. So the current map shows version 1 of the fabric and availability data as of June 30th, 2022. Our chairwoman recently announced that a new iteration of the map will be available on May 30th. So in about a week, you will see different data populate the map. That version of the map will show Fabric version 2 and availability data as of December 31st, 2022. So just a preview of what we expect to be different on this map. Across the United States and territories, there's about 1 million more broadband serviceable locations on this map, which is a huge improvement. Now, I should say, every state and every territory has both gained locations and lost locations, and both are important to improving the accuracy, right? So if we have locations that we didn't capture, maybe it's new construction, maybe our underlying data sets were outdated, so we didn't capture them the first time. We want to make sure those are added. At the same time, if we've, misidentified a rock structure as a BSL or building has been torn down, we want to capture those as well. Specifically in New Mexico, there was a net gain of about 20,456 locations. And of those new locations, about 13,000 were on tribal lands, which is a huge, vast improvement. At this point, I'll turn it over to Sairi, who's going to speak a bit more about tribal specific mapping. Sure.
Thank you, Kimia. Just for a small correction, the title that's on the agenda is my old one. I'm no longer acting chief of the Office of Native Affairs and Policy at the FCC because the FCC has a new permanent chief for the office, Bambi Kraus, who I hope some of you have met, and I hope that more of you will meet in the future. Right now, I'm operating as tribal liaison to the Broadband Data Task Force, where I work with Kimia and other colleagues on this very important commission initiative. So I just wanted to say a few words because there are so many tribal representatives in the room. We've heard from many of you that Indian country was really underrepresented on the pre-production draft of the National Broadband Map that was released last November. And as a result, we've been working closely with the tribes and with our fabric vendor to improve. So tribal lands show up in the underlying data we use to create the fabric in unique ways. And this meant that our vendor, CostQuest, had to find better data sources and adjust some of the tools it used to analyze the data. And they specifically designed a feature extraction process to support enhanced identification of fabric location records on tribal lands. And that automated feature extraction was supported with targeted manual review. And as the slide notes, version 2 of the fabric includes over 1 million more broadband serviceable locations than the initial version currently shown on the map. And I'm happy to share that tribal lands have seen significant increases in the number of broadband serviceable locations, or BSLs for short, between version 1 and version 2. We've had the opportunity to spot check and confirm those improvements with a number of tribes and tribal representatives. And the second version with those added locations was used by providers during the second filing window, which recently ended, March 1st, technically, and will show on the National Broadband Map later this spring. And I should say, when we publish the updated data. But we know there's still work to be done, and we really need your partnership and continued participation in our challenge processes. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Kimia.
Yeah, I should add the improvements that you'll see on version or the next iteration of the map are a result of a number of different things happening at the same time. So some of which is what Sairi described, right? CostQuest works to get better underlying data sets, more updated information, things like that. There's also FCC's own audits and verification streams on the availability front, as well as challenges that are continually being resolved. So there's a lot of different ways that each iteration of the map will improve. So pivoting now slightly to what everybody in this room and outside of this room can do to help us in that process to improve the accuracy of the data on the map. As I mentioned before, both the fabric locations and the availability data are subject to challenges by the public. These challenges can be individual, right? So any member of the public can go look up your address, where you work, where you live. And if any of the information on the map appears incorrect, you can file a challenge right through the map interface. Challenges can also come in a bulk fashion, which is an entity aggregating data for a number of locations and submitting them that way, which New Mexico has participated both on the location front and the availability front. So location challenges are about information about the actual locations, right? So maybe there's a wrong address associated with a location. The wrong placement on the map is a really important one. So for example, maybe we drop the pin on the garage or the shed, but really the house is all the way over there, right? And that's the one that needs the broadband connectivity. So you can help us literally move the pin to the right structure on the property. Another really important one, which I've already touched on, is missing broadband serviceable locations, right? This data set is designed to be iterative and interactive because the facts on the ground are always changing. And while we think that our processes will hopefully capture a lot of these changes, you all with actual like boots on the ground knowledge about your communities really are in the best position to tell us like, oh, there's new construction going up, right? There's an old school that's been converted to homes, and we want to make sure we capture that. Availability challenges challenge the data reported by ISPs. So for the purposes of the BDC, service is considered to be available if the provider has or previously had a connection at that location. Or the second one, which is a lot of words, but really what it means is like a consumer can call the provider, ask for service, and they can be connected within 10 days without any extraordinary fees. So with that definition of availability, this slide lists out the reasons why somebody could file an availability challenge. So it could be for things like provider failed to schedule install within 10 days. I called, they said, sure, I can hook you up, but 3 months from now. The provider failed to perform install. That would be maybe they actually scheduled to come and install tomorrow, but they never showed up. Provider demand for connection charges that exceed its standard installation charge. That would be a situation where maybe the provider is like, sure, happy to serve you, but it'll cost $3,000 to build up your driveway. That's not technically available under our rules. Provider denied it outright. Provider reported service type not offered. So that would be where maybe on the map, the provider has reported fiber. But when you call, they say, actually, the only thing I can hook you up with is DSL, something like that. The reported speed is not available for purchase. So that would be like maybe on the map, they reported a maximum speed of 100/20. But when you call, they're like, actually, the highest package I can sell you is 25/3. So that 120 package or whatever they reported on the map is just not available. That's different from reason code 7, actual speed not matching the subscribed speed. That is a scenario where maybe they report 100/20, you purchase 100/20, but you're not actually getting 100/20, right? That we consider a quality of service issue. We do collect that information, but it's not a challenge against availability. That goes into our consumer complaint center and gets handled differently. And then reason codes 8 and 9 are specific to satellite and fixed wireless technologies. And finally, the map also shows mobile broadband availability, which is also subject to challenge. Mobile availability can be challenged using the FCC speed test app by running on the ground speed tests. I should also mention that all of these challenge processes are open and will remain so on an ongoing basis. So there's really no end date or deadline, right? We expect, and it was designed by Congress, that this process is iterative, it's going to continually evolve, and the data will just continue to change and improve. And with that, I will hand it over to Natalie, who will speak more to the New Mexico challenges.
Challenges and successes, right? Okay, I have a lot to cover. So I'm going to go through the first slides fast because the meat, of course, is always later. Advance is. Oh, there we go. Okay, so just to give you some context, I'm a mapper, right? Kelly had said connecting the dots, right? As everybody's broadband is everybody's business. In New Mexico, I think it was Tamara Rosenberg earlier said, you know, this many eastern states fit into my one regional area, right? So I just wanted to represent in New Mexico that we have a complexity of jurisdictional types. So federal land, we have 4 major federal agencies. We have Pueblos, Tribes, and Nations, state trust and state game and fish lands. We have 33 counties, 107 incorporated places, 145 colonias. Almost half of our state is private land. And when you think about her dot map, right, that complex map that had all the different constituencies in it, not only do you have to work through all these jurisdictional logistics, then you actually get through all of those to try and serve the constituencies. And so I just thought that was a good point to make. For an update on the data challenge from New Mexico, for the FCC data, we have, I'm going to try, I think it's easier for me to look over there. I'm trying to look at that. So we expect when the new data, the new location data come out from FCC in June of this year, that New Mexico will have a net gain of close to 40,000 additional locations. So Kimia mentioned that we had a net gain of about 20,000 in the previous challenge cycle, and you know, through their methods and through our challenges, we believe that's going to continue to increase. On the service availability side, in the last challenge cycle, when I'll go over the timelines in a minute, the Office of Broadband ourselves, not all the rest of you out there, but just our office, submitted 188,000 claims, challenges to the claims of services that the internet service providers had submitted to the FCC, and over 100,000 of those have resulted in a data correction from the providers. And some of those are multiple providers on a single location. Some of those are in a location where, you know, maybe DSL doesn't meet the requirement, but fiber is also a viable alternative there. So it doesn't change the status. But as Kelly mentioned, right, almost 10,000 of those are expected to go from either served or underserved to underserved and unserved. So that's a significant change in the way that we see our data in New Mexico. What's next on the challenging, right? We'll continue to challenge on the FCC's annual cycle. We expect to continue to get better data, you know, as we're engaging with you and people are more aware. We know that there's just going to be more information coming in. It's going to increasingly result in what she mentioned, right? Gains and losses, right? These past 2 rounds, we've been really focused on making sure we haven't missed anything. And that was really important, but now we need to go back. New Mexico in particular, often our barns, our hay barns, are metal roofs, and our houses are flat dirt roofs. And so those don't get detected in the image detection software, right? So it's like, okay, well, let's get the dot off the barn and put it actually where my house is. 5 units. So the unit count is very important. If you've got a multi-unit complex, then you need separate fiber service to each one of those units. And we know that some of the 911 addresses where our responders respond to are not necessarily what's considered a broadband serviceable location. So those are just a couple of examples. Now this is the timeline. I said it's like an annual challenge cycle. I feel like we're constantly challenging their data, and we are. It's a continuous improvement process, but there are some key deadlines. So you see where we are today, almost at the end of May, and there's 2 major data sets that we're expecting out soon. One is the final service at the final locations. So the NTIA's BEAD allocation of that almost $43 billion is based on the data in that last orange dot, right? Because by law, they were required to go through a full challenge process of both the location data and the service availability data. And so that's where we are on May 30th. We expect to get those numbers. And then we've already challenged locations they were due in March in the second challenge cycle. And so now we're about to get new service availability data from the providers that the FCC publishes. We'll do a challenge. And then later this year, we'll get the final service at the final locations for the second cycle. What's important here is that I feel like I'm constantly saying, we really need your help to improve these data, and it's urgent today. So I mentioned the NTIA BEAD funding. I think Kelly, I'm hoping Director Schlegel is actually meeting with NTIA right now, advocating for what I'm about to tell you, right? And that is, I think currently NTIA is expecting our entire, our grant planning documents, our initial proposals, and then our final grant proposals to depend on the FCC data set. And what I'm advocating for is that we use what I'm just calling, New Mexico's best available data. And it has to do with exactly this cycle, because every time FCC publishes something, that's the best information sort of everybody has at the moment. Then we have 2 months to challenge it. And then it takes them another 2 months to publish it. And so if I can point, oops, I can't. And now I can't go back. There's the pointer. So you see here, so our initial plan, 5-year plan, and is due right over here. And then we have to have our statewide challenge process begins before the end of this year for that BEAD funding. And so we want that challenge. We want people to be submitting their grant. We want people to be using what we think is the best data, right? So we'll have created a challenge, in this time frame, but it won't yet be published by the FCC. So anyway, we're advocating for that. And so if you have data, if you have people who have resources, if you have questions, definitely reach out and to us. Okay, right. So here's the New Mexico, the FCC data versus the best available. And so in those pie charts, the FCC data are on the bottom. So that was the initial release in June of 2022, and there were 78% served. And in the top, we're using, this is called our updated serviceability, and we've basically created a data model to take in all these different data sources that we're aware of, and say, what do we think is the truth in New Mexico? Kelly likes to say, what's the truth table, right? Like, what do we really think is happening on the ground? And so we think that it's 74% served in New Mexico. And that's those numbers I was showing you earlier. So the sources for those data, right? When we did our challenges, we used 911 data. We had local entities submitting us information, addressing offices, San Juan County, Catron County, Bernalillo County, lots of counties like looking through their address records and data, permitting data and whatnot to make the data better. So we challenge locations, and those challenges are also part of this best available data. We're also using Ookla speed test data. We're using cell tower locations. We're using awareness of the statewide networks that are in place. So our Department of IT hosts a state network for a lot of government agencies. So there's towers around. All those federal lands I mentioned, they have infrastructure. Our oil and gas industry is very big in two corners of the state. They have a lot of infrastructure where they would like to help out their local communities. So we're having conversations with all these people about, getting their data and helping it inform what's really going on the ground in New Mexico. I will make one more point. So those items in gray haven't been developed yet, but we're planning on those going into the data model. One of them is the ISPs. So we're going to ask them to we have asked them to send us their FCC data when they send it to the FCC. So they had a deadline March 1st to submit data on availability. And so we want them to send it to us at the same time so that we're not waiting until May to get data that was, that's 6 months old, because we're constantly assessing grant applications for awards and we want to have the best available information at the time. The other point here is that the other thing we're going to advocate to the NTIA about and the FCC is the FCC's question is, what is the max available service at a location as of a date? And what we've learned in doing these knowledge of infrastructure challenges with the ISPs is that some of them actually change their marketing model. Is they change whether your address has service availability based on who else is subscribed around you. So even though your this whole room, all of your houses could be served today, but if half of you subscribed, then the other half, they would make yours not available because they can't service all of you. Does that make sense? Nods. So the point is that they're saying, well, the max available, I mean, I have a wire, I have physical capability to do this within 10 days. But if the state funded everybody to get a subscription through all the resources that we're now getting, they wouldn't be able to provide that service to everyone in the room. And so that's what we need to work with the ISPs to understand. And again, sort of have the best available data for New Mexico, even if it doesn't roll up effectively into a national vision. Well, and see, I think those were the important points. So here's some cool tools, right? So let's see, where am I? Made that point, right? So we have this isn't published yet, but and I heard Kelly say she doesn't like the color scheme. So of course we're going to fix that. But the blue are served. And so at the top here, when this is live on the web, you can select a region, right? Whether it's a county or a Senate district or a school district or a colonia. And then you select the type, and then you can select your sort of jurisdiction of interest. And so here I've selected Eddy County, and you can see how the FCC data compares to what we consider the best available data for New Mexico. This is an example of God, I was like, did I miss another video? I might have. This is an example where we're comparing the FCC data here in the blue to what you'll see in the colors when it starts running. It is the Ookla speed test data. There it goes. Okay, so there's a slider, there's a swipe tool, and it's coming across. And so the colors here, the purple represents the same, should overlap with the palest blue FCC data. And the idea is that percent served of BSLs, the pale blue, are getting really low speed test results, right? And so what we see, and then if you've got a green speed test result, and this is averaging points, it's not counting duplicates. There's a lot of math that goes into deciding what data to use. And so when you see these kind of tools, be suspicious, figure out what it is that they're comparing, make sure they're apples to apples. And that's what we're trying to figure out now before we publish this for everyone to use. But the green should overlay the dark blue. And so what we're seeing is there are greens, there are high speed tests in places where FCC is saying there is no service. And then we have low speed tests, you know, in areas that claim to have a high service availability. And so we're trying to figure out how to use this crowdsourced information to inform us to make better decisions. And the last point I'll make about this swipe is some points are in the UCLA data and they're not on the FCC map at all, which means somebody's out there doing a speed test and we don't have their location mapped yet. So that's that point. And I realize I'm out of time. So let's see. Yeah, so what New Mexico has spent 10 years building a huge foundation. We have, you know, the New Mexico broadband map, and I put all the layers on at once just so that you could see. If you go to this map, you know, you can turn on layers and kind of see everything that we're aware of or everything we're allowed to share at this time. And it was used all along to establish priorities and awareness, right? But the future is more sophistication. The FCC moved from blocks to points for locations. We've got a ton of new funding. And so all of that stimulates a more dynamic data environment. And so what I'm working on is the evolution of the broadband map to be more like mapping tools, right? And so I'm really interested in how to use our knowledge, our collective knowledge, to ensure the best outcomes for New Mexico. So we're building mapping tools to help you assess your status, envision your future, monitor progress, improve data. And I will say that the tools and methods depend on both your role, are you a consumer or a producer, and your scale of interest, right? Are you interested in yourself? Are you representing a community? And so we're trying to make tools that help you in all of those ways, no matter who you are. This is, for example, a tool for the grant applicants, our existing grant program. So it's about awareness and planning. And so in the purple, that is a previously awarded area. And then you can see the FCC unserved locations kind of at the end of all of those purple award areas. And so, you know, you can see these unserved locations are now being, you know, we expect them to have fiber because of that award. This is an extremely important tool. So I was telling you how we're using the UCLA speed test data. I want you guys all to put that little link at the bottom of your email, every email. I want to thank Luna County, the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. I know that there's probably more, right? But I know that they've done a huge campaign of putting these links in there, just in your email footers, and just get people testing. Like, just keep testing your data, because the more data we have, the better off we are. And 2 more slides. And these last 2 slides are really about doing challenges, submitting data. And it sort of summarizes, if you're an individual, if you're representing a community, you know, different ways you can do location challenges or service challenges. If you're confused, just ask us. We have a draft sort of best practices of, it's not a guideline, it's kind of just ideas and suggestions, because again, depending on who you are and what you're representing, you're gonna know things differently. And so everybody's approach is a little different, and we're here to help. And another mapping tool that we're very interested in providing to anyone who needs it is you know, online surveys, survey forms, mapping tools like on the web, and just tech support. So this is just an example of a web editing tool where if you wanted to upload your own contextual information, maybe you had a consultant collect a bunch of data for you, but you don't have a GIS analyst or the software to use it. You can upload it here and we can help you analyze it. I will stop there. Any questions for any of us? Because our time is up. Our time is 5 minutes past up.
We do have a question in the back room, but before we go to that, this is Jennifer over here. If you have license plate RFG 461, your vehicle in the parking lot is flashing its lights. And someone turned it into our registration table in case you want to go remedy that. So your battery is still working when you're ready to go. Here's our question coming from the back corner.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Barella. I'm newly elected county commissioner. First, I want to thank Kelly, Jennifer, the team. You guys have done a great job today. And the best thing is the networking that we have here. And what I am so excited about is that we're going to make progress in New Mexico. And of course, I'm excited about Otero County first. I would like to make a statement for just purposes of something for us to work towards. Some of our providers, well, let me sound like my daddy for a minute. Back in the old days, when they were making the railroad and laying down telephone lines, the Forest Department BLM said, "Here you go, have at it." So I would like to see the Forest Department and BLM here so that we can figure out how we can address being able to access those properties. Yep. And make agreements, MOUs, whatever we need to do to make sure we get it done. So we're not waiting a year, 2 years for this to happen. But my question is for mapping. Who oversees the challenges? Who approves the challenges? And how can the counties get some sort of authority to oversee that is done correctly? That yes, for sure, we do not have access in this area, or no, we do not, to help you with this mapping system.
That's a great idea. We can do, we're just trying, in that initial run, right? The Office of Broadband just hired up a bunch of technicians, right? And we all just started looking at imagery. But going forward, I mean, we've kind of done the broad brush thing, and now we need to get into the gory details. And I am coming to the New Mexico Association of Counties meeting with the GIS affiliate there in the afternoon on Wednesday, I think, to talk about just this, right? And I think it makes a lot of sense. The Office of Broadband generally is serving as a like a clearinghouse of sorts for broadband grant information and projects, and so I do have it. I've started investigating data privacy and the CostQuest licensing. And right now the way the FCC licensing works is we have a license for their data, but if you want to use it, even though you are a collaborator, particularly you're another piece of government, you still have to get a license of your own, right? But if we have, the way I'm working it right now is that if we have a web environment where all of our data are, all of our challenges, then we can give you a subscriber count, right? So that you're actually logging into our system, you're not using it on your system, you're uploading your own data. We're collaboratively working on that decision process together. That may work for some people, that may not work because you've got your own GIS and you want to do it your own way. And I know we met with Ketron County, for example, and they initially thought, well, we're just going to get a data package from you and do it ourselves. And then they ultimately just went and got their own license. And then we were still able to collaborate, but it just opened that up. Yeah, we definitely should keep talking about this.
And we don't want to fill up. Natalie, just to warn you all, is amazing. And by saying contact the Office of Broadband, check in with Natalie and her team at EDAC. They are amazing. And we will be hosting some lunch and learns. We've been doing some mapping meetings and other things around the state. As your community mobilizes, and many of our small communities don't have robust data and mapping departments or staff, please reach out so we can begin to scaffold our entire state to help together get the correct data and move forward. We did have one more comment in the back question before we move to the panel with Senator Luján and others. So I'm going to pass the mic over.
Hello again. Sorry to reiterate this, but another layer for the FCC maps, if it's possible to add affordability. Because again, if serviceability is there, but you're in a community that can't afford $100 a month, there needs to be some sort of metric that allows for affordability in there. A next generation map with that would be just wonderful for us to be able to target that, because that should be a priority for equity and inclusion. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. We've heard that from a few stakeholders already. You know, our directive from Congress was to map availability, which was a very specific sort of definition and directive that we had that we started with. With that said, in the future, like, could we add layers like what you're suggesting? I think that's something that, you know, our team is thinking through and definitely aware of. I also did want to add quickly about the last comment that yes, Natalie's team is like incredibly sophisticated and is doing a lot of great work. And so we absolutely encourage everybody to be working with them on their challenges. Um, with that said, I mean, you know, as she said, anybody can license the fabric themselves and file bulk challenges. There's also, you know, data can sound really complicated, and maybe on the bulk side, it can get that way. But there's also the individual challenge process, which is literally as simple as like going to broadbandmap.gov, putting in, you know, clicking, right, location challenge or availability challenge, filling out a few boxes and clicking submit. And we think that that's a really effective way. Like, I know there's librarians in the room, right, to like mobilize actual individual consumers. That's also, frankly, the best data there is like the person that actually lives there telling us, I've called, you know, this provider, asked for service, they couldn't do it. And so there's lots and lots of ways to engage, really big or really small, you know, a bulk challenge can be 15 locations. Like it can be thousands and hundreds of thousands. It can also be really localized and community focused. So I encourage all of you to come talk to us if you have questions. We'll have some handouts and things in the back. But yeah, we just really encourage participation in all shapes.
I just add one last about those handouts. We're a federal agency, and of course, we come with paper. We have handouts on both the broadband map and the Affordable Connectivity Program, which you may have heard about earlier today. And if you go to our websites, if you're engaging with your communities, we have outreach toolkits that you can download materials from that I think people have found very helpful. And again, as Kimia said, please do reach out to us. We are, you know, we are looking to help you as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And now we would like to move into our next segment, Shared Missions, Interagency Coordination for Universal Connectivity. And it is my pleasure to introduce U.S. Senator Ben Ray Luján.
From here? Yeah, you can take it. Well, good. I'm going to say good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. All right, that's better. We're going to have to get that caffeine replenished in the back of the room. I can't thank you all for being here. We've been told that there are 300 registrants for here alone in person, and there are many more that register to participate online. And I think this just shows how hungry we are in New Mexico to get connected, right? To the state leaders that are here, I see some of our representatives that have made the journey, that are making a big difference in our communities. It's good to see you as we do this together in every corner of our state. To all of our tribal leaders, our Pueblo leaders who are here, our Navajo leaders, our brothers and sisters from Mescalero Apache, who I understand made the journey as well. I'm trying to find Godfrey on Jotty's hand, but there he is. Thank you for making the journey as well. To every small community, every ISP provider, every builder, everyone that advocates for this happening. I just want to say thank you for taking time to be here. We have an incredible panel today, so I'm going to try to keep myself very short because we want to hear from these experts that made the journey to be with us here in New Mexico today as they've been traveling across the country. This was so important to them that they wanted to be here as well. So with no further ado, I want to introduce next to me, someone that doesn't need an introduction in New Mexico, Xochitl Torres Small, who is currently the Undersecretary for Rural Development and was recently nominated to be the Deputy Secretary at the United States Department of Agriculture. So Xochitl. Next to the Honorable Xochitl Torres Small is the Honorable Jeffrey Starks, who is the Commissioner at the Federal Communications Commission. And the commissioner was also recently renominated for a continuation of another term. So we should give him another round of applause for that. Another friend who is no stranger to New Mexico, and many of you have already worked closely with her in many capacities, but we appreciate her taking a detour to New Mexico to be home, to be here, as they were recently out in Arizona in and around the Grand Canyon with the Secretary of Interior as well. But that's none other than Heidi Tonicini, who is the Senior Advisor to the United States Department of Interior. Deb Haaland, Secretary. And someone who is going to be reviewing most, if not everything that will be turned in for consideration for funding at the NTIA is the Deputy Director of the BEAD program, and that's Miss Courtney Dozier. Courtney, thank you for being here. And again, someone who has been instrumental in getting us together and ensuring that there's a strong team and all of your input. You've been in many meetings with her as well. And that is our very own Callie Schlegel, the Director of the New Mexico Office of Broadband Access and Expansion. So let's just jump right into this. And my first question is to the entire panel. And it's one that there should be a strong answer. So I'm hoping that we hear that, but it's a simple yes or no. So if you want to add something at the end, feel free to, but it's a yes or no question. So whatever you're adding on is absent the question. It's whatever you want to add. So yes or no. Are we going to get internet for all and achieve universal broadband?
Yes.
Same for me. Yes, with a capital Y. What I would add is the excitement that you see around the country. And as you could tell, really from our panel, at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, the answer is yes.
Hello. Just checking if my mic works, but I will echo Xochitl here and just say yes.
Who needs caffeine when you have Senator Luján up here? Yes, with a capital Y. It's going to take all the folks in this room. It's going to take a lot of the different programs stacked on top of each other. Yes.
And from the state of New Mexico, the answer is heck yes. And thank you to everyone who helps us to get there.
Thank you. Now, Undersecretary Torres Small, over the past 2 years, the NTIA and FCC have received a lot of attention with new authorizations and new funding. And that's one of the reasons that there's so much interest here, because the plans that have been put together can now finally be put to action to add to networks that have already been established and expand those that need desperate attention as well. Now, this year, as you know, the agriculture committees in the House and the Senate are hard at work to pass the Farm Bill. How do you envision the future of USDA rural development and its mission to connect rural America? And how will USDA partner with the FCC and NTIA?
Senator Luján, thank you so much for convening us today and for your unique opportunity for leadership. And you are leading the way when it comes to the coordination that's going to be crucial to make that answer that we just gave possible. Having jurisdiction in 2 committees that truly will make the difference in terms of broadband, high-speed internet coverage for New Mexico is really exciting and a great boon for New Mexico. It's also, when I look at USDA rural development, key to why making sure that as we think about high-speed internet, we're thinking about it in the context of the Farm Bill as well is really important. As you know, USDA Rural Development is the only entity in the federal government whose mission is to think about rural. And that's really exciting. That's led to a lot of expertise. Rural development has been working in high-speed internet since I was in high school. And with this new inflection of money, it's incredibly exciting because now we have great partners with great abilities to fill so many gaps that exist and truly make the final leverage possible. But what we've seen at USDA is even as we build out, the needs will remain. So rural development was established with the effort to electrify the nation with the energy. And what we've seen, we're still giving loans out and now new investments in the Inflation Reduction Act for renewable energy to diversify our energy portfolio. Those funds, those investments will still be crucial even as we finally get internet for all. And so having that long-term picture about how do we not only invest now to get the coverage, but how do we invest into the future to sustain the coverage will be vital. And that's why thinking about it in the context of the Farm Bill, making sure that we're continuing to build partnerships and making sure that we're there for the continued resiliency into the future will be crucial.
Well said, and I see some of the electric co-ops here as well. So as we talked about, especially the most rural parts of New Mexico, absolutely instrumental that we all work together. Now, Director Schlegel, we expect the NTIA to release allocations for the BEAD program in the next few weeks. And I expect that we have a number of local leaders here that want to get started on a project to connect their community. Can you give us an overview of what's next and where the state of New Mexico's next steps for local communities to receive their part of the federal funding is?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Yeah, we're in exciting times as we hear on June 30th that NTIA will be making an announcement on how much New Mexico will be allocated for rural broadband connectivity and internet for all. We're very excited to hear that number. It will be somewhere from 100 million to, I'm guessing, 600 or 700 million. We don't know, but it is based upon the maps that Natalie was showing you in the last panel. Okay, the accuracy of the broadband serviceable locations and the service availability to those locations. So that's what feeds into the formula funding. So you guys helping to get the maps accurate on the tribes and pueblos in your communities is very key for us to be getting the right funding. So I want to thank you for all the help. You came to the workshops, you've been working with your communities, you've been calling Natalie. Thank you very much for that. So that's kind of the first stage, is getting that allocation announcement. Now we're in what's called the planning phase. Okay, we're going across New Mexico to the regional engagements, the listening sessions, the local conversations, and we've been asking you for needs assessments, for organizations to fill out surveys so that we can get the right information and the right data to feed into our modeling that's going to be used to put our plan together. So that's called the planning phase. Part of this meeting is part of that. Now, Commissioner Varela stood up earlier and she said, how do we get going? What do we need to do? Okay, part of what you can be doing is preparing for when we'll be able to do the grant making. Okay, you can be partnering with different aspects, stakeholders in your community. We had a good example from Mamacitas Cyberneticas, where they're kind of like a catalyst in the organization. I saw Bob Bunting out there. He's a catalyst in his organization. and you can form partnerships through memorandums of understanding. Our office has some guidance and some toolkits if you need that. But the more you create a partnership, the stronger your application is for when the BEAD and digital equity funds will be available. And you can also reach out to our office. We have some engineering support through Alex Trujillo, who you met earlier. He can help you put together a good plan. He can help you look at the maps. He can help you to say it's unserved over here, so let's do a broadband project over there. Where can we interconnect? Can we get to backhaul? So if you come together in partnerships, then you're going to be, as we put in the 5-year plan, August 28th, that has all the data we've collected from here, as we see what the allocations are on June 30th, as the maps mature, we're going to be able to put in a good plan with your voices on August 28th and an initial proposal in December and a digital equity plan in December, and then be able to do grant making to groups that you put together that have good broadband plans. And my office wants to help with that, to do good broadband plans so that we can give you the funding that will make it possible in your region. So there's a whole timeline to this, and there's a whole process, and you're part of the whole process. And we need you because you're the boots on the ground and you know what your region has and what your region needs. So thank you for helping us, and thank you all for helping us. And we really appreciate that we have this opportunity to do a timeline and a cycle time to get the answer right.
Thank you, Director Slagle. Now, Ms. Dozier, NTIA is responsible for many of the state's timelines in getting these funds to communities. So what are the critical dates people here need to be aware of for BEAD?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll be able to echo a lot of what the director just mentioned in terms of those dates. What I love about the BEAD program is that there is a cycle to it. First of all, Congress and their infinite wisdom said, what we're not going to do is do all of this planning and all of this funding and figure out who needs to be connected and when out of Washington, D.C. We know that is not going to work. What it means is some pretty big homework assignments for the states, but we are saying we're going to give this money to the states. Folks at the local level know where there's connectivity and where there's not. So this planning phase is something that we don't always see in federal grant programs, where we're saying we want you all to spend the better part of a year, and we want to provide some resources to do that, to say, how can we make sure that this money is going to get us across the finish line? So, you know, local engagement sometimes can be very performative. I can tell you, having spent one whole day on the ground here in New Mexico, that is not the case. You all are taking it really seriously. It's a requirement of our program because we know that without it, we will not get across the finish line. So engaging as part of all these stakeholder outreach pieces, making sure that your communities are represented in the 5-year action plan. That's a document that the state is putting together to say, how are we going to get from here to the finish line? Again, you can think of other programs where we just start funding the problem. And there's space and room for that. But for this problem, we really want to make sure that we are being efficient and strategic and thoughtful and leveraging what is a historic investment that is not likely to come around again. So we're going to spend, you all are going to spend the fall up until the director mentioned August 28th is when their 5-year action plan is due. Their initial proposal, which again is what they're going to communicate to NTIA, they're going to communicate out, here's our plan to get everyone in New Mexico connected. Your voice, your community, your street, your house needs to be represented in those plans. They've got a lot of infrastructure set up to make sure that it's happening. And that is a really critical part, whether it's the maps, whether it's the plan, it's all those pieces. And then next year we'll be off to the races. They'll be selecting sub-grantees. And we'll get shovels in the ground. But the critical dates for us coming up, allocation at the end of June, 5-year action plan at the end of August, initial proposal challenge period at the end of the year, and then and then we'll come back and we'll answer the question again with a new set of deadlines.
Thank you, Ms. Dozier. Now, Commissioner Stark says part of the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Congress established the Affordable Connectivity Program, or the acronym that everyone's using is ACP. I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding in agreement with that. Now, the ACP provides a discount of up to $30 a month for people that are eligible for internet service per household, and up to $75 per month for households on eligible tribal lands. The FCC is tasked with administering this important program. Can you talk about the importance of the program, the successes you've seen, and how it intends to work alongside both the NTIA and the USDA?
Absolutely. ACP is a program that was in the Infrastructure Act. It was that great marriage between what we've been talking about here, the 46 billion appropriated for BEAD. But it really is, the last thing that I'd say, obviously the access issue. The second thing that a lot of us as policymakers talk about is digital literacy, making sure in particular that folks know how to get online, for seniors in particular, making sure that they know the steps, know how to get online safely, are actually literate in how to use the internet. But the biggest piece that I've started to talk about is the issue of affordability for millions of households. Simply affording the internet is not possible. And I've long said, if you are a household that is debating whether to put food on the table, whether to light up, literally keep the lights on in your home, internet is probably very far down on the list. And so making sure that these vulnerable households really get paid attention to is something that I have been focused on. I think in their infinite wisdom, again, I would say Congress was very smart in making sure that there was a $75 subsidy where you're talking about building on tribal lands. We have over 18 million households. That's households, not people. 18 million households enrolled, but only 255,000 of them are tribal. Let me say that again. Over 18 million are now enrolled in ACP. Only 255,000 of them are tribal. So we have some work to do, y'all. We have more momentum to build, y'all. In New Mexico, 164,000 are enrolled in ACP. Nearly 800,000 are eligible. One of the things that we have really focused on is building awareness. This is a brand new federal program. And so making sure that we're out there, the reason I'm here, why my FCC colleagues were here, is making sure that we're getting the word out, especially in so many communities, getting trust, earning trust from them about the ACP program is absolutely mission critical. And so at the FCC, we have just as of last month, a 6.5 million tribal competitive outreach program. How can we start to incentivize better outreach that goes on tribal lands? And so a special shout out here in New Mexico to the Pueblo of Jemez. They got a $379,000 grant. And the Pueblo of Zuni got a $325,000 grant. So, yes. As you can see, if you just do the math here, that's almost $700,000 here in New Mexico to make sure on tribal lands we are better getting the word out, awareness, trust, and then helping to get some of these vulnerable households enrolled. The other thing that I'd say that goes to your question, Senator, is this. ACP, it turns out, actually is going to be incredibly helpful even when you're talking about rural populations. This is the interconnectivity, how intertwined the issue of the digital divide really is. And so you don't have to take my word for it. BCG came out with a white paper recently that basically showed that in order to make sure that the BEAD dollars go as far as possible, there is a 25% subsidy basically that ACP can help in states that are trying to stretch their BEAD dollars. So we have over 110,000 households in each state that are enrolled in ACP. That includes all of the states that also have significant rural connectivity access issues. So ACP is also helping to empower BEAD. It's helping our friends at NTI make sure that every dollar gets stretched as far as possible so that, again, we can come back many years from now and hopefully say mission accomplished.
Well said, Commissioner. I appreciate that. Now, Ms. Tuedicini, tribal communities, tribal nations, pueblos are facing unique challenges, especially in broadband. Topography, homes built out of Adobe. You know, I don't know that Congress had that in mind when we were talking about some of the challenges that we're going to be experiencing. So whether it's home or it's in the community, it's the mountains or it's the trees, we all have to be working better to deploy broadband. Now, as we see in the panel today, the federal government's broadband programs are a multi-agency effort. How is the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Indian Affairs coordinating and communicating priorities for broadband infrastructure, especially when working with state partners like New Mexico with the Office of Broadband?
Thank you, Senator. Really appreciate that. And thank you for having us today. So Interior, the U.S. Department of Interior is in a very unique space when it comes to broadband and specifically tribal broadband. Interior historically hasn't had an outwardly or external face when dealing with tribal broadband issues. I think everybody in Indian country here knows that Interior or the federal government in general isn't sometimes on the cutting edge of technology development, especially when you get to tribal communities. And I'm a member of Navajo Nation. My family, didn't have running water, more or less broadband internet, or, any sort of telecommunications systems that were set up. And so I know firsthand how vitally crucial broadband internet and phone service can be on reservations and large tribal land bases when emergencies are taking place, which can cause some great hurdles, which again, I think a lot of people in this room understand pretty intimately. And so what Secretary Holland is doing right now at Interior, she has announced last year at the White House Tribal Summit, the new Office of Indigenous Technology and Communications in the BIA. And so what that office is going to be doing as we continue to get it set up is provide tribes with services to help connect interagencies, to help provide interagency coordination where we haven't had that previously, and also help with technology development on new initiatives that are pretty unique. So when you start looking at the 638 contracting or tribal self-determination contracts, so tribes can help run their own programs, there's a lot of new and interesting policy ideas or movement that we could start helping to incorporate for tribes, similar to what we're doing with the 638 contracts for co-management. And so we've had tribes come to us at Interior and say, hey, this would be a really great place to develop out. LiDAR services, for example, would provide really great mapping services for tribes. And so that is one situation that has been brought to our attention, and there's plenty more because of the work that we're doing to help make sure tribes really have their foot in the door when it comes to technology and broadband development, especially with the historic funds that President Biden has dedicated to across the country, but also specifically to Indian country. With that, Interior is also continuing to implement our memorandum of understanding for tribal electromagnetic spectrum that was also announced last November with the FCC and Commerce Department. And that was the first MOU that has ever been announced to take a look at tribal spectrum access in considering tribal sovereignty. As folks know, tribal lands are unique. And when you get to Interior, who we've historically managed tribal land and resource assets for tribal communities, we have specialized tools to help develop and integrate some of the Interior's data and information into helping to expand data connectivity maps for multi-dwelling living units, which don't exist anywhere else in the federal government. And so with that, we're going to continue to help diversify Interior's work there. A couple other things that we're really proud of doing is helping to elevate tribal voices at the national level. Just a few weeks ago, and I applaud Commerce Department on doing their first tribal consultation ever in history for the development of the National Spectrum Plan. That is huge because when you're looking at unutilized federal spectrum for commercial purposes, those are new economic development avenues that really haven't been explored in Indian country before. And making sure tribes have the input in development of these national spectrum plans is crucial and vital. And I'm really proud to be working for administration and underneath our first Native American cabinet secretary in the United States to help move these initiatives forward for Indian country and also for the administration as well. And so I could go on and on about a variety of things, but I will hand it back and get into some other issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, Ms. Dozier, as you can see in today's panel, and across everyone participating today, there's incredible entrepreneurship, homegrown interest, and developing companies and solutions to broadband, to tech, to connectivity in all aspects here at home. Now, to NTIA's credit, you've established an entire team that's committed to New Mexico as well, and helped host today's summit. So I want to thank you for that as well. Now, how is NTIA working to consult with the communities you intend to serve in the BEAD program?
Thank you for that. So I mentioned earlier the homework to the states, right? So this is not a one size fits all. What works for New Mexico, we know, is going to look different from what works from Virginia, where I'm from. So we are, by design, the BEAD program has federal program officers in every state and territory, all 56 states and territories around the country, to help facilitate these conversations and work hand in glove with the broadband offices in each state. You all have been hearing from Heidi Bird all day. She's our federal program officer here in New Mexico, raising her hand in the back. She's standing next to Gabriel Montoya, who's with our tribal broadband connectivity program, who clearly everybody knows. And so they are really, again, working exceptionally closely, like maybe too close, depending on the day. But with the state broadband office, with you all on the ground, they're part of the road shows, they're part of the listening sessions. We have a requirement as our program to host tribal consultations in every state and territory. Those are happening here in New Mexico. So trying to walk the walk, right? Again, nobody is going to be pleased from the White House on down if at the end of this investment period, we look back and say like, oh, we came so close, but we just didn't get it right.
So my next question is going to be to all of you. And as you know, I have the privilege of serving on committees in the Senate that has jurisdiction over most federal agencies.
We know, Senator.
And one of the areas that I focused on is working with the Senate Commerce Committee and Indian Affairs and Agriculture to improve coordination and interagency cooperation. Sometimes it's just to get us to talk to each other, right? So the question is, surprise, surprise, another yes or no. Is that interagency process working to effectively promote broadband access and affordability? And I'll have a follow-up for anyone that says no. So no pressure to say yes. I'll start with Ms. Xochitl.
Say mostly, and it has to happen every single day. So it's not something where it's a bi-weekly meeting or it's a regular meetings at the White House, both of which happen, but it's also about individual projects. So with New Mexico having awarded $300 million in New Mexico already, or with USDA having awarded $3 million in New Mexico already for high-speed internet, the challenge, or just a little bit under, the challenge is going to be with those existing projects, how do we now coordinate as NTIA funds are dispersed, or to make sure, as rural development did, that we require the affordable connectivity program and participation in that. So yes, it's happening mostly, and we have to do it every single day.
Commissioner.
I say yes. I think it is incumbent upon, this administration. I see, having served in a federal capacity for quite some time now, the interagency coordination and cooperation, collaboration seems as strong as ever in my mind.
Ms. Ottolini?
Yes, I would say mostly. I just want to echo the response from the panel as well. There are some places, specifically within Indian country, where because broadband and spectrum development is relatively new, there's a lot of federal policies that have yet to be fully shaped. Again, Interior is very new to the conversation, but because of our relationship with tribes and longstanding work on Indian lands, that's where we're really trying to help develop that conversation in a relatively new space for us. And so as part of that, just recently, our Indian Affairs team, our Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, Brian Newen, refreshed the National Policy Memorandum to require tribal consent for tribal broadband connectivity program, or really just any sort of federal funding that's building infrastructure rights-of-ways through Indian lands, right? And so with the historic investment with President Biden's infrastructure funding into Indian country, which was the biggest bucket that was allocated from the White House, this administration, for infrastructure funding. There's a lot of new players that might not understand there's longstanding policies for development of different fiber lines, rights of ways for Indian country. And so that's one place where we're trying to make sure that we're coordinating with our federal family to make sure that everybody's on board there. And that's just reflective of, again, longstanding copper line fiber rights of ways build out that has been in existence for a very long time. But those new to some of this newer technology, broadband development, may not know that. Also, one thing we're doing is helping other agencies uplift the work that they're doing. The Affordable Broadband Connectivity Program, we've tried to get that information out to tribes as well. And then just something off the top of my head is, I know the FCC also expanded their rule on the eligibility for tribal libraries last year. And so we're helping to connect agencies that might not have that familiarity or touch point there with tribal communities specifically to help get that information out. And of course, our land management agency as well works very closely with local communities to provide that information as well.
Ms. Dozier?
I say yes, and I love the description of federal families. I feel like people say federal partners all the time, but family, y'all know, family doesn't always get along perfectly all day, every day. And I think in this particular question, that is right. We are doing more to coordinate on interagency level at the federal level than we have ever before. At NTIA, we're on the phone with our partners at all of these state and federal agencies every day. There's treasury calls, there's capital projects funds, and it's not just about making sure we're not stepping on each other's toes. It's about making sure that we are leveraging each of these programs to be the most efficient with these kind of precious tax dollars. The only other piece I would mention is that yes, all of that is happening at the federal level in DC, but our federal colleagues that are based in states are also doing a really amazing job in this subject. So the USDA state director I know is meeting very regularly with the FPO in all of our states, or with the to talk about permitting with DMV, or all of these different pieces are slowly coming together.
Well, she's here, so she smiled, so I don't have to ask a follow-up. I appreciate it. And another proof point, Director Slagle?
Yes. And my answer is a stellar yes. And the reason why is every day I'm in kind of awe and gratitude on how supported we are at the state level. I just want to thank you. I mean, I can get a call with FCC, with Ed and the team whenever I want. I can get a call with NTIA if I have questions. The FPOs, Heidi and Gabe, can, if they can't answer a question, they go find out. Okay, just going forward, everyone is there for us. And I don't know how you do it for 50 states. I really don't. And just Senator Ben Ray Luján, where you brought Kimball to testify on the Senate floor, okay, and be a voice for New Mexico, and how in communication committees and your Senate Commerce and Agricultural and Tribal committees, how you tell about New Mexico and you tell about the nuances. So I just, I'm just thankful and grateful that we're not alone in trying to do this. Where I think it's going is there's going to be some big, hairy topics. Okay, as you mentioned.
Well, family.
Yeah. There's going to be some big, hairy topics. One is, will the affordability connectivity program that's needed so much, will it continue? Okay, or does the state has to come in and try and pick up where you left off? Okay, well, you know, that's one big question. Another big question is on the rights of way that Ms. Todachin brought up is, as I said earlier, we have projects that have multi-layers of rights of way, pole attachments, easements, permits. I had one company told me they have 1,000. I'll have to validate that, but it sounds like a lot. I know that Kimball, who spoke earlier, her project for, you know, out of the tribal broadband connectivity program with 3 tribes has 48, and they're the first one in the Fast 41 at the permitting level. So we have to figure this out together on how to, and then with the sovereign lands, you know, just working with them, getting in front of their council and say, what is it going to take to come across your land? What do you guys say about that? So there's some big hairy conversations. The other one is the wonderful news is 702 million already flowed to New Mexico for 71 projects. Some of them are coming to us saying because of inflation now, they can't do they can't finish the project anymore. Okay, because everything went up. So how do I help them finish those projects? Okay, on the mapping, there's a question there on what's the max speed in the area. But what we're finding is maybe that question needs to be tweaked. What's the speed when everyone's connected? Okay, because it's different than a 1-day max speed than when everyone's connected. So we're going to have to evolve and work together and keep this great relationship going forward to tackle a lot of these big questions.
Well said, Director. I think we can say thank you again for why Ms. Schlegel is Director Schlegel, right? I appreciate that very, very much. Jeff, do we have time for one more? We're doing okay. So the next question is for the entire panel, not a yes or no, but keep it tight. So connectivity is a core part of many of your agency's individual missions. The FCC was created to maintain a universal service mandate for telephone, telegraph, and radio, which has now evolved to broadband. NTIA was created with tech and telecom specifically in mind. USDA Rural Development was hugely successful in bringing electricity networks to the furthest corners of our nation. And Interior was created to maintain our oldest and most ancient connections, the land and resources that we all depend on. So with this shared mission of bringing our nation together, one, how do you envision your agency's role today and in the future to provide universal broadband service to every family in the nation? We'll just leave it at that.
One of my favorite things about rural development is that it's focused on how we make sure that people have the chance to thrive in the home that they love. They can choose not just where they're from, but where they'll stay. And when it comes to investing in rural places and what it takes to be able to make that choice, high-speed internet is crucial. And being able to have a family like this is going to work to make sure kids of New Mexico can stay in New Mexico. And as we work to invest in the infrastructure of high-speed internet, USDA Rural Development is also here to make sure we're investing in how we use that through economic development. I was just talking about the application of making sure we're getting it connected to our water and wastewater systems so we can operate those more efficiently, to make sure that we're using it for precision agriculture so we can continue our strong heritage of agriculture. These are the ways that we'll make sure we continue to be connected across the country, across rural America, and across all of America.
Well said. Very well said. You know, I would say, you know, when I talk about digital equity, you know, it's not just, you know, something, words that don't matter, that go into the ether. You know, these are part of my core mission, what I believe is the FCC's core mission. And so, you know, there's so many, in particular, in bringing universal service. I love your framing of that. You know, I say it a little bit differently, which is it is ensuring equal opportunity for all. And so these go to the different missions and different programming that we have. You know, one thing that I would give a special shout out on then I won't get into the weeds on is, the mechanism internally for the FCC is called contribution. And in particular, the mechanism whereby we fund some of our programming is broken. And so the future of it is something that is going to have to be solved. The good news for all of us in the room is that we have no greater champion than Senator Luján on this issue. He has been forward thinking, continues to work with his colleagues there. And so it is something that actually is part of the future on how the FCC is going to remain and function at its best. But it's an exciting time, and I do believe that we're absolutely going to get to an internet for all world.
I would like to mimic the equity initiative that Commissioner Starks brought up. So that for rural communities and tribal communities, similarly, that is a place where commercialization of spectrum can be taking place due to their unique structure and availability of unutilized spectrum bands. So I think that would be groundbreaking for a lot of communities, especially as we see here in New Mexico, to again create new economic development avenues that we've really never seen before. I think that due to the sovereignty, unique sovereignty of tribal trust lands, that there's a really interesting nexus that's never been reviewed before of how, technology development can be utilized on larger land-based tribes, which, you can't do spectrum commercialization or development in more metropolitan areas like Southern California or, Washington, D.C. So there's really unique opportunities that have been untapped, and it really could revolutionize rural communities, tribal communities in a way that we've really never led before in technology for new developing technology coming down the line. If you think back to the 1950s, everybody got their information on the radios. We're now in 2023 and we're on 2.5 getting information on our computers and our phones. But you give it another 10 years and we're going to be on a different spectrum band because our security cameras are utilizing all the space on our 2.5. So we're going to have new technology, whether we like it or not. And it just depends on whether, we want to help get rural communities and tribal communities up to speed to help develop those technologies. So I think those are really great places where we could see some really significant movement and that we've never seen before.
I can add it at NTIA. We're really focused on implementing the speed program as it has been written and getting our states across the finish line. This is a $42.5 billion program, which means we have 42.5 billion reasons to get it right the first time. So we'll be focused on the infrastructure piece, but the digital equity piece is exactly the tail of all of this. It's going to be one thing and it's going to be really important, and everyone hears the choir and doesn't need to be preached to about why the internet is important. But if you're a family that's making tough decisions, if you're a senior that hasn't lived this your whole life, once you have it, what is the value? What can you do with it? How can it improve your life? Is going to be the piece I think that we focus on a lot in the future.
Thank you. You guys out there are what I call the RSGs. They're real smart guys and gals. I mean, you know what's needed. You know how to put it together. You know how to build it. You know how to operate it and maintain it. You know how to bring in cybersecurity. But what my office has to do is to make sure that we coordinate and we collaborate and that we include everybody and we make sure no stone is left unturned and no pocket rural area of New Mexico is left out, that the colonias aren't left out, that the smallest town, the ranch, is not left out, the farm. We also have to make sure you get the right data. Okay, we have to work with you to make sure all of the served, unserved service availability is marked correctly so that we're all singing from the same sheet of music and we're all making decisions together. We have to make sure you know where the backhaul is, you know where to interconnect. We're building a node up in Gallup, New Mexico, thanks to UNM. We're up there. It's a meet me aggregation point. we're hoping that internet service providers come in there and cross connect with each other so that there are resilient routes, that there, if something gets cut, you can go an alternate way. From our office, we have to make sure those kind of things are happening so that we have the best framework, the best network, the most robust network for New Mexico. And like I said, you guys are the ones really coming forward with the plans and doing the work. But our office has to make sure you have the data, the coordination, the collaboration, and all of the facts and tools that you need to do the project. So looking forward to working together with all of you out there and all of you up here to make that happen.
Well said, Director. Well, that concludes our panel. Can we give them a round of applause, please? Well, we can't thank you enough. We're going to ask you for your indulgence for a couple of minutes as we get ready for the next conversation, everyone. Thanks again, and thanks for being here, and thanks for coming to Mexico. You're always welcome back. And by the way, to all the federal agencies, New Mexico is the perfect test bed for you to try all of this out. We're big, we have mountains, we have rocks, we have adobes, we have trees. With our tribal brothers and sisters and we've got it all. So just come on down here and build it. And then we can show everyone else how to do it. Thanks again, everyone. Just let me know. We'll just hear what I'll go down this and some more curious.